Welcome to the Purple Rock Survivor podcast, where we are going to celebrate one of America's greatest holidays by overindulging on this double episode of Survivor. Happy Black Friday to you, Andy.
And you as well, John. That actually is an American tradition that has infected our borders because Canadian retailers were tired of losing all their business to this thing called the internet.
We have a lot of poutine sales and Tim Hortons.
Toques, 2 for 1, I believe, and all the beaver you could use.
Pelts for a loony or a toonie.
Yeah, I mean, loony, that'd be crazy prices. We're not.
Yeah, exactly.
Especially in these markets. Let's start with the basic question when we're talking about things that make this harder. Do you kind of wish that we didn't get 2 episodes this week? Or at least these 2 episodes?
No, I'm actually kind of amazed that they burned off 2 episodes at once, and they were both really, really good, because generally, that's a signal. 2 episodes on the same night generally means, like, okay, we're getting through a predictable stretch here. But these were awesome, and inexplicably, they were on the day before Thanksgiving.
Yeah, I think there's been some complaints about that. I'd say I don't know how much control the Survivor production company has over CBS's airing of things. I think they can make suggestions, but they don't, if they get to determine necessarily always when they're going to have to do 2 episodes or when they air before a holiday. I'll also say that as this season proves, Survivor very much is a show for its fans. It's not, it picks up new audience members all the time, which is a surprising thing that we've noticed doing this thing, where people that, were not alive necessarily when it started, or at least not very old, are fans now, and just that. But I don't think they need to worry about the fact that they're putting on episodes on a Wednesday before Thanksgiving and worry that, people won't watch. Their fans will be there, their fans will watch. This is what Survivor is now can brag about amongst television, is their audience is solid and will follow them. And that's a huge thing in TV's landscape right now.
Yeah, if you're a Survivor fan, you recorded the episode, you're going to watch it. So yes, their overnight ratings might be down for this particular week, but that doesn't mean that less people are going to end up watching. Everyone's going to end up catching up. You don't just skip 2 episodes.
Yeah, and in terms of not burning, uneventful things off, I would say, as a podcaster, I kind of wish there wasn't 2 episodes that we need to go through when we don't have a lot of time to talk about it. But yeah, they didn't need to find 2 bad episodes to string together. I think that might be an indication that there aren't any this season. There hasn't been so far. I don't know if you could have found 2 that previous would have, fit together better than what these 2 did. And I will say the first episode from this week that finished really strong, and in some ways I kind of wish that it, that ending with, and we're going to get into it with Jeremy and Sierra, that kind of stuff got buried a bit in what happened in the second hour, but it was also still 30 minutes of people suffering in the rain. I feel like on its own, maybe that would have been a little more disappointing.
Yeah, so they ended up offering the shelter deal, I guess, if you want to call it that, at the challenge. And I totally understand it, because I had watched Africa this past summer, and I remembered watching it and thinking, man, these people are stuck in this tiny ass space. They're miserable. They're eating like crap. They weren't even getting poured on all the time like these people were. There was just no way for there to be any sort of narrative, because what are they going to do? They're stuck in the shelter the whole time. They can't go off and strategize. They can't look for immunity idols. They're just sitting there freezing and miserable. And I think Survivor producers in real time saw this happening and thought, okay, we're going to have 3 days of them sitting in a shelter. There's no way anything interesting is going to happen here. And they had to do something to intervene.
Yeah, they know, we can make an episode out of that. We're good at this. They probably couldn't make 4. And, they have access to things like long-term forecasts, probably enough that told them that this ain't going to stop anytime soon, because tropical, islands tend to have rainy seasons. It's funny you mentioned Africa, because, of course, anytime Survivor does things a little softer than they have in the past, you're going to get, grouchy old survivors complaining about it. And sure enough, that happened with Ethan and Lex. It's like, it's actually, I thought that was amusing. It was, it's just indicative of the human spirit and why people, like, don't want to lend a hand to, like, refugees or something, because it's like, I had to pull myself up by the bootstraps. Never like, I remember that it was awful in Africa, and man, it would have been nice if they would have done that, and maybe our season would have been more entertaining. No, no, no. We suffered, so other people should suffer too. You're cool with the fact that Survivor did something, right? That the producer stepped in.
Absolutely. I mean, we've talked many times about how just mild intervention to the game that makes it more interesting is totally fine with us. And that's, I think, exactly where this falls. What was interesting to me is that they made it a choice. I think they knew, like you said, that the unrelenting rain is not a variable they could control. So I'm kind of surprised they even left open the possibility they might not take the offer.
Yeah, and I mean, that's the only way they can do it, right? They can't just come right out and give it to them, because that would not work for the television show. That would look too much. There has to be something sacrificed in order to be earned. There was actually a really funny conspiracy theory that this was all designed just to help Joe win immunity, to which I respond, some people are stupid and not worth talking about. Because no, I mean, for one, they knew that Joe was probably not going to sit out, but they didn't know that everybody was going to sit out. They didn't know that anybody who was worth competing against him was going to sit out. And moreover, like, their responsibility isn't to help Joe win. Their responsibility is to make sure their television show isn't just a bunch of people suffering. And, like, it's not like they got walls. Like, they're still out there in the conditions. What this really, I think, did more than anything is, it's going to keep them a little more dry, but I think that fire is the big key.
Mm-hmm.
They can eat now.
Yes.
Like, they hadn't eaten in 3 days. That's not good television. Like, they still might be trapped in a shelter. They still might end up having to deal with stuff where they can't strategize. But, yeah, people weren't eating. People weren't doing anything. People were freezing. The show had to do something. And they kind of got lucky. Like getting 5 people to sit out is... that's a lot.
Yeah, you're getting half the crew, basically.
Yeah, I think it's the right number. I think some people, feeding into that conspiracy theory. I don't know why I bring it up, because it's funny. It's like, oh, they only made it 5 to make it easier for Joe. Well, what would have been the right number? 2? 2 is just giving it to them,
yes.
Right? And, like, 5, half. That seems to be the exact compromise. Because what they can't do is what they've done in the past. They can't, like, when they've given food to people that are starving, what did they take away from them? The freaking shelter. Right. They had nothing to take from these people.
And you can't take away their food because it's raining.
Yeah. I mean, the food they probably have isn't very good if it's been rained on for several days. They've done in the past, and, it was probably scheduled, but if it was a hack they could do, is, give them tools to build something. But you can only do that in the tribal phase, when it's, who's going to build the best shelter? And here's your, Sears tools and Rupert drowning people. So, like, they had to come up with something for the sake of the television program. I think this was a pretty good thing. I thought it led to an interesting scene of drama, because they teased this one out. They told us, like, the day before, with a sneak peek. And we had some conversation of, like, who won't go for it? And, like, it wasn't obvious that it would be 5 for sure. And instead they got, 8.
Yeah, they got almost all of them. What I think is interesting is we talk a lot on this show about how luck is such a crucial element to anybody winning this game. The sheer luck involved here, which isn't entirely obvious just watching the episode, but if they had just stayed trapped in the shelter, they can't go off and plot and strategize. So essentially, whatever plans you had made for, who to vote out 2 days ago, 3 days ago, the last time you could actually leave the shelter and talk to people, that's going to be your plan. Like, no one's able to scramble because you're all densely packed inside this terrible, leaky shelter.
Yeah, and then, the idol thing that they ended up doing, which obviously must have been a bit of an audible, that they would have lost that. Like, yeah, there's nothing they could have done other than, all right, we're going to a tribal council. So something had to be done. What do you think about the choice people made? Because, Sierra kind of chose to not compete for immunity, and she went out. I don't think she ever would have won, so I don't know how big a decision that was. But what do you think about, like, if you were forced with this decision, what would you have done?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, and the one that we had said all along is, okay, so Joe is the only guarantee to not give up immunity, and appropriately he didn't and won immunity as he should have. But I mean, I was surprised there were so many. I thought getting to 5 was probably iffy, but it seemed likely just because the conditions were so bad, and I'm sure they had said to them, like, you're gonna get a water, like, really oversold it more than Probst did. So I was just a little surprised that they got so many, but I mean, you could make reasons for all of them sitting out. I did find it funny though that Abby rolled her eyes when Joe was like, I really thought about sitting out because come on.
Yeah. Well, maybe he thought just like what was the social cost, but then who cares? I think the fact that they got 8 people shows that how necessary this was and why the show had to do it. Yeah, that it wasn't even close, and they're all like, "Yeah, okay, we need to do this." And like, yeah, if you would do it whether you're not, I guess it would depend on your position. Obviously, if you're Joe, you do not. But if you're anybody else, like somebody was taking a big risk, even if it was like a fish back who didn't know, figured he couldn't win, but even a Jeremy, because not getting a better shelter might cost you the entire game, You might end up getting medevaced because you're too wrecked, or you might not be able to do anything. You might not be able to execute strategies that you need to do in order to further the game. So in some ways, it was a big risk to give up immunity, but it's like many things in Survivor. Sometimes you need to take this big risk now or lose forever, and you could argue that for everybody but Joe, this was one of those times, because they might not have been able to win Survivor if they had to put up with these conditions for 2 more weeks.
And you know what else I loved, by the way? Was Joe, after saying, I really thought about giving it up, but then I didn't, because it's just a little rain. It was like the nice little slap at everybody else that gave it up. Like, oh, sorry, I didn't realize that you could handle this so much better than everybody else, God of Survivor. But
now, that said, he probably could.
Probably.
He's a young man, He's not, a 90-pound woman. He's not an older guy. He's not me. I couldn't handle it. But yeah, he probably could handle it a little more. Also, because he's a golden god who probably is not affected by things like weather or anything else.
Yeah, but it just made me laugh because later on when he started talking about his social game, I'm like, you know what? If you're talking about your social game, that would be a black mark on your social game there.
I mean, yes, but there are different kinds of social game. I'd say for Joe, yes, black mark. But social game doesn't always mean, palling around with everybody and, being nice and doing what the group wants. Sometimes it's, intimidation and, this could work in that sense. And I do think there's an element to that with Joe. I think there's an intimidation factor. Like, he's already got a lot of people psyched out at challenges before they even start. And maybe that's what he needs to do because, I guess he doesn't need to win every immunity, but most of them.
Yeah, and that was pretty surprising, but I guess we'll talk about that later.
All right, so moving off the rain topic, the other big thing that happened in the first episode was Sierra went home. And I thought that before we talk about the elimination everybody wants to talk about, we should give her some time because I think she deserves it.
Yeah, well done. I mean, I talked last week about her and how impressed I was with her this season in a way that I really wasn't in her first season, but she certainly took advantage of her second chance. She showed that you do get better your second go-round, and she was playing from a disadvantaged position again, but she has experience at that. She got very good at it. She knew how to try to sway people to her side and what assurances she had wanted when she was on the bottom before, and I think she did a great job. I mean, there's no shame in her going out here. She was awesome. She got blindsided by an idol. It happens.
Yeah, no, she got 7 out of 10 people to vote the way she wanted them to vote when she was down in numbers for 3 consecutive votes. Like that was a win. And the only loss is that she assumed that she had 8. And Jeremy was not one of them. That's why the vote split didn't work, and that's why the idol got played. Like, she didn't even target somebody with an idol. Like, it wasn't just that she got booted by an idol, but she got booted by somebody else playing an idol for another person. Like, that's pretty extraordinary circumstances. And to get to your point, you were impressed with her this season in ways you weren't before. I obviously was a proponent of her in her past season, but I'll say this: she played much better this time. Well, worse result, but a much better game, and that's Survivor, right? And
Yes.
too many people get focused on placement or winners and losers and all that. And I think by the time this season's over, especially, people will probably figure out that Survivor is an incredibly high variance game, and any number of things can go one way or another. You have not as much control over these factors as you'd like, so we can't just judge people based on that. Sierra Easton got 7 out of 10 people to vote for her, and she lost because of an idol. She played really well this time, and maybe next time that idol doesn't get played, or something else.
Oh yeah, I mean, we could have had her gone, if they had split the votes previously and Wentworth had played her idol, it could have been Sierra then. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're a bad player because you went out in an earlier spot than you did in your previous season.
Well, here's the thing. So maybe Jeremy doesn't. If Jeremy doesn't play his idol, Steven goes home. Then Joe. I think we can run back other than chaos theory, rainbow, butterflies flapping their wings type stuff. That Joe still loses. Steven's elimination from the game, I don't think or her inclusion of it, I don't think changes the map on that. Joe probably goes home then because now there's not the Steven and his threatening advantage play anymore. And now she's in the final 8 with probably very good, that could have been the path of Sierra winning. And people will say that, well, no, she wasn't winning the season, didn't feel like she was going to win the season. That's an edit thing based on the fact that she did not win this season. But, if you look at her game as a whole, it was a possible winning game as much as any of these games out there are.
Yeah, if you look at the people that she was aligned with, she certainly has some tight bonds with people. She's getting along well with Steven, with Kelly, with Cass. Obviously, she didn't get along with Savage, or maybe Wigglesworth as well, but you don't necessarily need to sweep the final jury, so she could have been fine. She could have won.
Yeah. And if you just, based on perception of what, the people out there, they just voted her out because they deemed her the most threatening element. So, put that in front of a jury, that probably translates into I've respected your game, especially if she was able to get that, to the end, because this wouldn't have been her last move to get there. So yeah, I think, a great game for her, and I think that's also kind of just indicative of this season and the way we've been judging people, and that we typically ask the question, and we will tonight, what did this person do wrong? This season we haven't been doing that as much because the answer, I think, for many of them was they got beat. It was necessarily their mistakes, but more the successes of others. And I think that's exciting.
Yeah, and we've talked in previous seasons, too, about how you can make the best possible move, and you still end up going home in that episode. Just sometimes it's going to happen. You might have done everything right, and sorry, unfortunately, you're going home either way.
Yeah, and the critique could be that, because she put herself so far out there, because she was, playing so visibly hard that she made herself a target. For me, I would counter that. That's kind of pre-Tony Vlachos thinking. The complete of trying to avoid being seen as threatening or as a target. Sometimes you just have to try to win, and 19 people don't.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't fault her for that because again, 7 out of 10 people voted the way she wanted them to vote this time. That sounds like success. But she went home because Jeremy played his idol for Steven. So let's talk about that because it was really exciting.
It really was. They even hit the commercial break as soon as he did the hold up bro move. And there was that, I mean, it seemed like why would he say it otherwise? But still, the whole commercial break, you're thinking, but is he really going to do that? Or is that just a tease and this is a predictable vote?
Or is he going to play it for himself
exactly.
unnecessarily?
Well, yeah, you kind of figured that wasn't going to be the case because he knew where the votes were going.
Agreed, yes.
So they come back and he does the hold up bro move. He gives it to Jeff and just really kind of mumbles his way through it. Doesn't even just sort of casually hands it to Jeff that's for Fishback. Just walks and sits down.
Well, Jeremy wants everybody to know that he's the coolest guy in the room.
Yeah, and
you know what? Look at that room. He might be.
Oh my God. Did you see Steven's face? Steven was like, you are the coolest guy in this room. And I think most of the people watching thought the exact same thing.
Yeah, and you tweeted this out as it happened. I thought it as I watched it many hours later. Steven can't beat Jeremy now.
No, he's doomed. And I loved how he immediately said, like, you and me to the end. Like, you may as well just say, I am so happy to get second place to you now.
Yeah, but at the same time, I don't know if he could turn on Jeremy after that and win a jury either. Like, I think that was a Steven destroying move for Jeremy.
Yeah, it was a win-win for him.
Yeah. So, was it the right move though, given what would happen 3 days later?
You can't go by, results necessarily. I think it was probably best for him because he saw that he, in his mind at least, had what could still be a solid alliance between Spencer, Kimmy, Tasha, and Steven. And he really did think, and I think it's accurate, that Steven was going to stick with him the whole time and be loyal. And that's pretty valuable to have, especially in this season with the voting blocks constantly moving around.
It also attaches you to Steven's advantage and makes it less likely that Steven's advantage will be used against you. So, yeah, I think, 3 days later, that person still went home, and Jeremy is down one idol. But you can't judge Survivor in that way. You have to look at the process. I mean, kind of what we were just saying, Sierra. It was the right play. It might not have fully worked out, but it's not like it'll completely be for naught. Clearly that impressed people in the room, and those people will get to vote for Jeremy if he plays the rest of the game well. I do think one potential long-term consequence that could, be his undoing is that it kind of showed the dividing lines of where loyalties are, and more importantly, where Jeremy's loyalties are.
Right, and that's why immediately after that, he essentially plays damage control as soon as the votes are read and turns to Spencer and said, I would have done that for you too. Unfortunately, he says that right in front of Kelly, who turns around and can hear the whole entire thing, which again, sort of outing his alliance. But also, I don't know how much of a sell that really is when you're saying it right after you didn't reveal that you were going to do that to Spencer.
Yeah, and Spencer voted the other way. I think it was a good play by Jeremy to try to use it to also buy Spencer's loyalty. It clearly didn't work, or at least was undone by a later move. But all in all, I think it was a good play. It didn't work out 100% the way he wanted. It worked out pretty good in the moment. He saved his closest ally, turning him into a goat in the process, impressing a jury, and eliminating a strategic threat on the other side. Those are all good things. We'll see. And, he's still got one more idol. So, Jeremy's got some chances. Now here's the question. Why is it Jeremy? Why is nobody ever talking about voting out Jeremy? Why did they vote out Savage instead of Jeremy? Why did they vote out Steven in front of Jeremy? What does this say about Jeremy?
I thought that was incredibly interesting, that even after Jeremy played the idol for Steven, an idol that nobody knew about, the very next tribal council, Jeremy's not the target, it's still Steven. I get that Fishback has an advantage, that most of them don't even know what it does. But why is he the target and not Jeremy, who just saved him? Why don't you... I guess maybe the fear is that he'll use that advantage to protect Jeremy, so you're going to go directly at Steven?
Yeah, I don't know. And I think this probably speaks very well of Jeremy's social game, that people are not targeting him yet. He's doing something out there to keep the attention off himself, whether it's, dogging it at challenges, whether it's seeming amiable to work with anybody, but not seeming as dangerous as Fishbach does, because they've shown secret scenes. Fishbach obviously does try to work with everybody, but there's so much flop spit in the way that he approaches people. It's not hard to imagine that there isn't any when somebody talks to Jeremy. I imagine speaking to Jeremy fills you with some level of confidence and assurance, or at the very least some understanding of where you stand, whereas talking to Fishbach may be a little less so. The other question is, does this say that people are not seeing him as a winner right now? Like, is that a negative?
I can see that argument, but at the same time, I think it's more of the former, in that it's people see him as someone that they can work with, they have some level of relationship with, and there's a level of trust there. I think Jeremy had convinced a lot of different people that he was fine with them to the end. That's why I'm a little surprised that the idol play for Steven didn't backfire, because that's essentially drawing the line and saying, like, okay, so I'd laid it out to you, Sierra, that I'm fine with going to the end with you. I'm fine with going to the end with you, Joe, whatever. Now I've made it very clear, no, I'm willing to put my neck on the line to save Steven. He's important to me.
Yeah, so, I mean, I think that was a dangerous play. I do think that even if it does say that people are not seeing Jeremy as the biggest threat right now, that's not a bad thing. He's got plenty of time, and his entire strategy is revolved around keeping the target off him for as long as possible. And what's interesting is, because of the advantage, Stephen Fishbach became a meat shield for Jeremy Collins.
Yeah, I don't think that Jeremy had ever intended it to be that way, but it was some good fortune for him.
Well, I also think maybe some of it's pregame reputation, right? Steven had a big reputation. I mean, he was a finalist for one, and then he's a know-it-all, and he writes his blogs and all of that stuff, and that was something that people repeated over and over again. Some of those people are not in the game, but I think some of them still might think that Steven Fishbach is a mastermind, a dangerous player. Whereas Jeremy Collins is a second jury member on a very lowly regarded season. And that could be helping him.
And also helping him is that he was a big enough fan to realize that Steven is the type that's going to stay loyal to his alliances. He saw Token Teens. He knows what's up.
Yeah. So yeah, we've mentioned his name many times, and I think we'll be spending the majority of the rest of the... I said majority.
Majority.
The majority of the rest of the podcast talking about Steven. Steven.
Yeah, go ahead. I hear you want to take a shot at him.
Yeah, okay.
Kick the man while he's down.
I was going to ease our way into it, but look, honestly, and I'll lead this off with the truth, and we've said this many times before we made jokes about him. We like him, and I'll just say this, I like him, and I'm not just saying that like the way you say something and then you trash somebody. I actually found myself this season, and especially of late, liking Steven even more than I probably did before. I like the way that he thinks, he analyzes so many things, and he invites us into his headspace. I've enjoyed his bonus scenes more than anybody else's. I enjoyed his Ponderosa quite a bit. So I actually really do like him, and that's why I understand that he's been getting the most kid glove treatment of anybody that I've ever seen on Survivor.
And to his credit, those bonus scenes are great because he's very good at analyzing Survivor, and apparently even in the moment, he's good at commenting on what he's seeing and what's taking place and what's going on in his head. That's interesting stuff. So he's good to watch in confessionals. He was very entertaining to watch in all the other aspects of the game for entirely different reasons, though.
I think Steven was great television this season, and I think that his complicated edit gave us a lot to chew on, and I think it was also an accurate reflection of the man himself, that he is somebody who can succeed in one area and fail in the other. What kind of bothered me when this episode was over, it was just how so many smart Survivor fans were just giving him a pass on everything. Now, there obviously were some like, oh, why didn't you split the vote? Why didn't you split the vote? And we'll get to that. But more just like, and obviously if you're replying to him, if you're adding him, if you're a friend of his, of course, yeah, sure, you gave it a good go. It was great watching him. And again, I will reiterate, it was great watching him. I think he was one of the top 5 players of this season from an entertainment standpoint. And I would not be surprised if when it's over, that'll still be true. But like, I kind of think he played really bad. like really bad. Like, let's break down Stephen Fishbach's successes in this season. He blindsided Monica Padilla and Kelly Wigglesworth.
Mm-hmm.
Ooh.
Hey, you got to start somewhere.
Yeah, but that's it. Otherwise, he got saved twice by Jeremy Collins. He would have been voted out 2 earlier times if it were not for Jeremy. The one that Savage went home, those people were ready to vote him out, and he was completely unaware. And then, obviously, 1 hour prior to the time he was voted out for, our time. His single-minded pursuit of Joe, I think is also what cost him besides just having the advantage. It was easy when people are kind of gathering around targets, and if you're Joe, who do you want to target? Jeremy or the guy who can't stop talking about voting you out?
Yeah, all accurate points. I will say that you left out the fact that he did manage to dive in first and get that advantage, which I guess you could go either way on that, because on the one hand, does it make him a bigger target? Probably yes, but as you just mentioned, he was apparently constantly scheming to go after Joe, so I think Joe, being immune and having a say, was probably going to constantly target Steven anyway.
The big Steven fan brigade of the season set him in opposition with Savage, the evil Andrew Savage. In the end, Stephen Fishbach had nothing to do with the elimination of Andrew Savage. In fact, voted with Andrew Savage that night. Then, the story that Steven set himself up with, and I think very self-consciously, has the white whale, Ahab, and I don't know if everybody's read the book. I actually haven't because they didn't assign it in school, but things did not go well for Ahab against Joe. And again, when Joe leaves this game, if Joe leaves this game, it will have nothing to do with Stephen Fishbach. His resume is blindsiding Monica Padilla to protect Spencer Bledsoe, who, may I remind everybody, was instrumental in voting him out, and Kelly Wigglesworth, which, okay, that happened. Again, we're going to talk about what he did last night, and I think some of it is actually very defensible. But I find that people are just blindly giving him a pass on everything because they like him. And you know what? I've said many times, as fans, you're allowed to be fans. Not everybody has to be hypercritical. Root for who you want to root for. But if you're going to do that with Steven and never criticize the flaws in his game, or at least exaggerate the successes of his game, then maybe you don't get to go on and insult the Facebook fans who are cheering for Joe and Rupert.
Yeah. And I'm a little surprised that the Rob Has a Podcast universe did not get torn asunder when Spencer went after Steven.
Yeah, and maybe there's time. Obviously, there was some Steven fans who did, like Eliza, but that's Eliza.
Well, Eliza didn't directly. I was waiting for her to finish the episode just to see if she would start adding Spencer, and she didn't.
What? Oh, I Adam, but I do think she threw some shade. So I mean, that's kind of just my rant about the Steven reaction. And I get it. He was fun. I like him. I look forward to listening to him talk about Survivor again. And I think he'll be better at it now than he was before. And he was plenty good at it. But now he has this fresher perspective of the modern game. And now he'll get a jury perspective, which he's never had before. And Rob barely has either. But, like, in the whole, he did not play well, He didn't go to tribal council that often, and when he did, what was his success rate? 50% maybe? I haven't done the math, I just called that out, but Monica was one, the merge happened, and then who went?
Yeah,
Cass.
Let's not work out the exact,
anyway.
We don't care
But
about
he didn't vote out Andrew Savage. He, I guess he did vote out Sierra, but only because Jeremy made that happen. So, it wasn't, he was interesting. I don't think he was good, and I think it would be better of us to admit that. But let's talk about what he did last night, because it was also a great episode and very exciting. He misplayed the advantage. Was it worse than what Dan Foley did?
God, no. I think this is more of that, JT in Heroes versus Villains type of screw-up, where it's an understandable risk to take. I mean, he legitimately thought that Joe might have an idol. And so seeing that he had this advantage and that he could then use that to get essentially an easy vote split by taking Joe's vote away, that's a decent play. His mistake, of course, was thinking that Spencer was on his side, which is clearly not true. I do wonder what Spencer had said to Steven to convince him that they were solid again, because Spencer had just voted for Steven. He was one of the people that tried to blindside him. So I don't know how he repaired that relationship enough in 3 days that Steven was like, okay, yeah, we're good.
Yeah, this is the defense I'll give Steven. Not only did they think Joe might have it, they thought he had it. I don't even think there was a might. Obviously there's a might because there's always a might, but I think everybody was convinced that Joe had an idol, that he was not going home that night. or at least probably not. They had to take their shot, but I mean, if Joe has an idol, he's obviously playing it, so they needed to do a vote split. Um, and like that's what he said since. It's kind of what Jeremy said on Twitter since. But they also kind of in the episode when they were talking, when Jeremy and Spencer and Steven were talking, they didn't say if Joe has an idol. They said, yeah, but Joe has an idol. So I think everybody was convinced, and I think maybe some credit for that actually goes to Joe. He must have done enough to put that seed in people's head. Maybe if it's just the paranoia that Joe has engendered in everybody. However, yeah, you nailed it. Why do you trust Spencer that much? He literally just tried to vote you out. And, I mean, I think, as you alluded to, we have to give Spencer credit. He must have done enough to fool everybody because he wanted to vote out Steven, and he still wanted to vote out Steven. But what had you done to repair that relationship to just be like, shucks, Spence, no harm, no foul?
Yeah, I'm really curious about what happened, and I'd like to see that as a bonus scene. I haven't even checked to see what the bonus scenes are this week, but
it's not there.
Oh.
What he could have done with Spencer is what he did with Tasha. So Steven, here's a plus in his ledger for people that are hating me right now. He won a challenge, and it was super awesome when he psyched out Abby while doing so.
That was amazing. I loved it.
However, we are not a podcast that necessarily says, well, he won a challenge, so he must be awesome at Survivor.
Nope.
But then he had a choice to take people, and this is always a choice wrought with danger. Did he make the wrong decision there?
Well, only by not saying Jeremy immediately. Why is Jeremy not the first name out of your mouth? And then no one's going to be remotely holding that against you if you pick Jeremy first.
Yeah, and some people are like, oh, why pick Jeremy? He has on his side. It's like, yeah, well, he owed him. And it's very clear that Jeremy was not be like, no, it's cool. He wanted to go on that reward.
Mm-hmm.
You need to reestablish that relationship, and you're not showing any cards. Everybody just saw what Jeremy did for you.
Yes.
Now, Spencer seemed pretty disappointed with the way it went down when he chose Tasha instead of him. But I'd say if he chose Spencer instead of Tasha, we get that interview from Tasha. So I kind of feel like I'm giving Steven a complete pass, Also, I'm not sure bringing Spencer would have necessarily bought his loyalty. I think Spencer is playing this game as a game, and he's willing to potentially damage personal relationships. I don't think they will because this isn't Survivor All-Stars.
Right.
But, he and Vetus were close, and that didn't stop him there. So I'm not sure even bringing Spencer on the reward would have changed Spencer's mind, but doing so would have had the risk of Tasha anyway. What's interesting is, if they weren't afraid of the idol, and again, he thinks that he had it. He just thinks he had it. He didn't even think he might have it. They didn't need to do anything but have the four of them, and they would have controlled that vote and probably, the game after that.
Well,
because it would have been a 5-3 with Joe's vote going away.
Yeah, and not only that, if you're convinced that he has it, just essentially make it seem obvious that you're voting for him, and then vote for the person who doesn't have it. Throw all your votes on Abby.
Yeah. All right, here's the other thing. One last critique of Steven. How could he not convince all those people to vote out Joe? Why was that so hard?
That was the most amazing, and we actually had a commenter. It was Diego Armando on our site who had suggested that they should use the first time Joe lacked immunity, the first time he didn't win the immunity challenge, to target Jeremy, and that was a brilliant idea. Somehow instead, they used that moment to target Steven. That was amazing to me. How is Steven your big target when Joe's not immune?
Yeah, and obviously some of that goes back to what we were saying, that, his pregame relationship made him a threat, his advantage made him a threat, but I also think that's a bit of a mark on him as a player, and what I was getting at, that Steven just does not engender confidence, at least he didn't this season, and maybe because of his Joe obsession, maybe it's because he started behind the 8-ball and Savage's macho tribe, but he was shifty enough that people were more scared of Steven than they were of Jeremy or Joe, and that's odd, and also I think a strike against him as one of your jobs is to do what Jeremy's doing, to get people to not want to vote for you, especially in a season like this that's so fluid. He should have been able to get people to vote out Joe. That should not have been the Herculean task, and I guess maybe we should get to that. Why didn't they? Was that a huge mistake that they didn't vote out Joe?
Probably. And this is going to be one of those things where results...
That's all we can ever do this season. We don't know.
Well, results will soon show us if it was a huge mistake, but I think he was always destined to lose a challenge. It's just a matter of once he does it, unless you have an incredibly good reason, you're going to use that opportunity to blindside somebody, and I don't think Steven is necessarily that target. Then, yeah, you have to take him out and work out the rest later.
Yeah, and I think it's like most questions. Was it a mistake to do this? Well, it depends on who you're asking or who you're talking about. It very well might have been a mistake for Keith or Spencer even, and we'll get into Spencer next. But if you're Kelly, I'm not sure that it is. Because is Joe that much bigger a problem for you than the Jeremy, Steven, Tasha, Kimmy alliance?
Yeah, and not only that, if you're Kelly, when you get to Final Tribal, say you're there with Joe, if you're comparing resumes, Joe winning a lot of immunities is nice, but if you can make the case for yourself, like, no, I actually did things in this game strategically. I got idols, I managed to blindside people, I controlled some votes.
I took out the dominant alliance, including Savage, Jeremy, Steven. Yeah,
exactly. I think, she doesn't necessarily have to be too afraid to take him to the end. It's still a little risky, but I don't know that she needs to be as scared of him as, taking Jeremy, or even, potentially, Fishback.
Yeah. No, I think, especially for her, and then maybe, a couple other people connected to her. Maybe Abby doesn't.
Abby doesn't.
I don't know if we should assess, but that idea, and maybe Spencer, that Joe wasn't as big a danger as them. Joe is an asset at this point because the bigger danger is finding yourself down in numbers to the dominant alliance and never being able to have a chance. Needing to win immunities, Maybe now, if Joe wins 3 more immunities, it doesn't matter to you because they're not voting for you. You can use that time to vote for them. So, yeah, when it first happened, like, oh my god, I can't believe they took out Joe. He literally might not lose again. But there's more to it than that. They need to be able to beat the voting block of Jeremy and Steven. And they showed themselves 3 days ago to be pretty powerful, even if they didn't have the votes. And they know Steven has an advantage. It seemed pretty clear that Kimmy was never going to turn on him. They probably had a good idea that Tasha was back in the fold. That's 4 people in a tribe of soon to be 8 if you eliminate Joe. So maybe Joe was more useful to them now than he was dangerous. Because you have to get to that jury and you have to be able to convince them, and it might have been pretty hard to do with Jeremy and Steven controlling the game.
Right.
So, Spencer.
Yeah. Let's talk about Spencer.
He went a little quiet for a few episodes there, during, the different idol plays and stuff, other than, his awesome O faces. He was obviously dominant in the, edit beforehand to the point where conspiracy theories came about. But is he back on top now?
We somehow didn't get the overwhelming orchestral swelling Spencer growth arc this episode, but I don't know that I would call him on top. I think he's in a decent spot. I haven't really heard his name brought up as a potential target. He doesn't somehow have that street cred that Steven does, which is bizarre. Also, I don't know that he necessarily was the one that called the shot on Steven. I mean, we saw him helping solidify the votes for that, but I don't know that he was necessarily leading that coalition to get Steven out.
Yeah, I don't know either. We didn't quite see it. We'll say in her Ponderosa, Sierra credited it to, or I guess in Fishbox Ponderosa, Sierra credited it to Spencer. That could have just been her trying to, not make Steven angry. And I shouldn't say his vote out then, but the vote for Steven when she went home, because obviously she wouldn't know who did it 3 days later.
Right.
But he obviously was the swing. Like, if he doesn't swing over, it doesn't happen, right?
Right.
Steven has said that, his mistake was basically trusting Spencer, which is just, that's what happens on Survivor, right?
Mm-hmm.
But in terms of, our leaderboard, so, is he in control of the game? No, I don't think so. I'm not sure if anybody is. But going into that episode, if you were to ask me to rank, actually, we did ask everybody to rank who
We did.
is the most likely to win, I would say Jeremy was in the top spot. Jeremy just lost a key ally. He's down an idol. More people voted against the way he wanted to vote than voted for him in 2 tribals in a row, I should add. So can we still say Jeremy's at number 1? Or do we have to look for somebody else? And if that's somebody else, then maybe it's, Golden Boy Spencer, who has returned to a heavy portion of the edit again.
Yeah, and it's one of those two with Wentworth as a solid number 3, I think.
Yeah, I think she's still like dark horse. She could win, certainly, absolutely. I don't think it would be a huge stretch, but I don't think at this exact moment in time, the edit has positioned her as a clear winner. Just a candidate. She's a candidate, without a doubt. I don't know. I don't know.
Well, I think that there's pretty clear tiers being established here, and I think that those 3 are the top tier. And
and then Joe's kind of his own thing. It's hard.
Yeah.
You don't know how to judge it. He could win it all. And honestly, Survivor doesn't need to tell any more of the Joe story than that.
Right, exactly, because if that's what's going to happen, you're already telling it just watching him win immunities.
And then everybody reacting to that. And be like, oh, why didn't they tell us more? It's like, why? It's not necessary.
Nope.
Just, I mean, he's doing stuff, and, he was available to be voted out and did not go home, so he requires a little bit of credit for that, even if it's just that he was a useful pawn in somebody else's game.
Right.
That's something he was never in his first season, so that's something. But, yeah, they don't need to tell any more to the Joe story than look at Joey Amazing, be awesome, and that would satisfy a large portion of their audience, especially as the numbers dwindle down and you could just focus that on more. And maybe some more showering scenes. But moreover, I think this season leads to a bigger question, is does pole possession mean anything? Like, has anybody really sustained its success?
No, I mean, it's tallest blade of grass gets cut by the lawnmower generally this season. So I think really right now the best predictive thing is to just figure out who can't win, and then you're just going to kind of figure out from who's left over who might be in the best position. And I don't know that you're talking very, very small degrees that they're being separated by at the top.
Yeah, and I feel like, obviously, I have not gotten a single prediction right. On our predictions board, between the 5 of us predicting and then the readers get to vote and highest vote getter, I have the totals and I wanted to put it in Survivor font. So they're all images. And I had not had to make a number 3 until this week. We've sent 12 people home. So it's been a very unpredictable season, not just for me. And I think there's been some people that have suggested that maybe that is not good. That this season is a little too formless, that there's been too many twists and stuff, and it's getting hard to construct a narrative. What do you think?
I can understand that line of reasoning. I don't necessarily agree, because I think if you're going to have a season littered with twists, the time to do it is when you have returning players that are more able to adapt to those sorts of things. And I think these players are. So I think it's kept the season entertaining to me. I don't necessarily need the long-term narrative of this specific alliance dominated the game and did this and this and this. If the alliances are moving around from week to week, that's fine with me. Although, really, I just watched The Genius, which is a Korean TV show where the alliances move around every week anyway, so I'm very used to that, and I enjoy it. So I get the people who aren't feeling it, but I'm loving it, though.
Yeah, I think it was very well articulated by some people on our site, so this isn't where I do the thing where I take one fan's opinion and construct a straw man or anything like that. Tune in next week, or maybe I already did it with the Fishbot conversation.
Maybe.
Yeah, probably. I will just say that I don't know if there's actually been that many twists. I think we might be exaggerating that. They went from 2 to 3. That was a twist. That had not happened before, and thus necessitated going back from 3 to 2. So there was one more swap than normal. That's happened in one other season, and it was a disaster. And maybe that's enough. That's not nothing, right?
Well,
2 twists might be a big thing, but other than that, the advantage, A, they did it just last season, and B, it kind of was meaningless. So other than that, the constant shifting of what's up, what's down, what's twist, isn't production throwing so much at these players. It's these players throwing it at each other. And I think what we're seeing here and why it feels a little chaotic right now and a little formless is what happens when you cast a season with few duds.
Yeah, when there's not enough fodder in there, this is what ends up happening. People actually go at each other, and there's still some fodder left, what little there was from the start of the season.
Yeah, there's a little bit, but, even you say somebody like Abby who cannot win. She's not fodder. She's an agent of chaos, right?
Right.
And we're going to talk about her in just a second. But, yeah, this is a group of people being very self-interested in the ways that they are. And it's, again, why we haven't been able to criticize too many people, because they're doing it their way and within the abilities that are afforded to them. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't, but that changes things. We haven't gotten what we usually get, of people craving the security of stasis, and thus forming a narrative for us. Instead, people are constantly looking at the landscape and saying, no, I am the star of this season and I'm going to make it about me. And that doesn't happen every season. That happens with maybe 3 or 4, if we're lucky, 5. Like maybe Akagian had 5 people like that. Usually it's a few. This season, it's like 17, and that's what we're getting, and I am loving it. I don't care that I look like an idiot every week with predictions that go bad. I don't need to use Survivor as my predictive platform, because I have instead the ability to judge people post-haste and look smart that way.
Mm-hmm.
So if no narrative ever forms, that could be a problem. Unless the narrative is that this was a season of people constantly upending things for their own benefit.
And that's such a perfect transition to discussing Abby Maria, Destroyer of Worlds.
She's back!
Yeah, long time no see, Abby, which I can't say was a bad thing. I loved, by the way, how she threw out the I'm going to decide at Tribal Council thing, which is totally, first of all, terrible, but also, that's essentially code for I'm not on your side. I'm not solidly on your side. So I can understand why you might be like, you know what? Screw you then. We're going to take you out instead. But taking out Abby when Joe is immune and Fishback has the advantage just would have been such a waste. But I'm sure they were debating it. Like, oh man, we could just take her out. We could all agree on it right now.
Yeah, I think it enters your head just in that, God, she makes it so hard. But it's just like everybody else at the beginning of the season, and, that was the one criticism that we repeated all the time. Just get rid of her, just get rid of her. But it's at the same point, and for those people it's the same. It's that there's bigger fish to fry, or we need her, even though we can't trust her. And it's, if you want to know why this season has no form or function, maybe the answer is simple. It's Abby Maria Gomes.
She's certainly helping to blur those lines that they might be trying to write in the narrative.
Yeah, even Steven, at some point is like, screw it.
Even
we think Joe has an idol, let's just get rid of her because I can't talk to this human being. Because she was flipping on him when he's just like asking her. Again, it's because of his nebbishy Steven ways probably made her not feel comfortable. But then she was doing it with Spencer too,
and Kelly, didn't she do it with Kelly too?
To a degree, and I think if you want to point to what a story that would work really well for Kelly winning is she was the one person who could tame the dragon.
I don't know about tame so much as tolerate
or use, right? Because oh my God, it was great, and maybe this is a reintroduction of that arc, and it was tiring for the first bit, but I could be ready for it again, especially if it leads to people just be like, Abby's got to go.
Yes. And I will say that of the possible people who have done the best job of wrangling Abby, it's Kelly and Tasha probably.
Yeah, except Tasha, when she finally got that break, she's like, I ain't going back.
I mean, she did fine, and then she's like, my duties here are done.
Yeah. Whereas Kelly, I think, Kelly's able to keep her powder dry, and I think also because Abby is run out of other options. But at the same time, would it shock you for Abby just to be like, pissed at Kelly one day and decide to vote for the majority?
Not
and
remotely.
Destroy her plane? Not at all. And, Abby has become a thing as much as the weather and advantages and idols that these elite game players have to deal with. And, it's kind of amusing again.
Yeah. And makes it completely unpredictable, which is another perfect transition into predictions for next week.
Yeah, so Steven going home, while I did not predict it this week, was the first person from a losing tribe that I had said at any point in this game would leave the Survivor. Other than that, anybody whose face is in my column is still in the game. I'm almost calling that a win.
Yeah, you are magnificent in your failures.
Yeah. So with that in mind, I almost just put a bunch of names in a hat because it couldn't be any worse than what I do, except that would have required the work of printing out names and putting them in a hat.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have a more sophisticated prediction model?
Well, I had assumed last week that Joe wasn't going to lose either of those two challenges and he was going to be immune, and then he would lose this week. For some reason, I felt like, all right, this week should be where the streak ends. I was just apparently 3 days too late. But so now I'm not going to say Joe because I'm thinking he's going to win this next immunity again. And
well, quick note on Joe. Like when he finally loses, he was still like second place. Like, god damn, man.
Yeah, exactly. So
Okay,
right back to the top of the pack here, and then I guess I'll just say Kimmy. I don't even really know why. I'm just going to say Kimmy.
Good as reason as any. I also don't think Joe will win. It seems like just a stretch to suggest that he's going to go on this 2-game losing streak. Obviously, all events are their own self-contained thing, and things could change. Except, of course, that the Survivor producers are conspiring to help Joe win the game. There's that.
And Spencer.
And Spencer.
Yeah, they're both.
And Savage. I don't know. Yeah. They seem to not understand their concept that there's only one winner. So, Joe's immune. If he isn't, he's going home. I think that was, we used Joe's vote one time, and also people will have less fear of his idol now. Except that he is an idol. So then, I think the most threatening person in the game for the people that have the most votes together is Jeremy. Because Jeremy has been on the smaller end of 2 straight votes now. However, Jeremy has an idol.
He does.
And he ain't gonna get blindsided after 2 straight tribal councils of people voting out his main idol. So then it's all about who Jeremy and potentially his allies were voting for. So then that flips back on who's the most dangerous on the other side. And Joe's immune. So I'm gonna say Spencer.
Okay.
I think Spencer gets idled out of the game next week.
Okay.
All right, so you guys have a holiday that I had a few weeks ago called Thanksgiving, and I just thought it'd be a nice time to quickly say what we're thankful for in terms of Survivor and type stuff. What are you thankful for, John?
Andrew Savage's beanie. It's fantastic. I kind of wish that he would do the backwards hat thing at Tribal Council.
I know he still has that move. I don't know why he hasn't got that.
Yeah, I mean maybe he's just keeping that. That's his closer. He's going to pull that out for Final Tribal. Who knows? But it's fantastic, and I love it.
I would say to the people who are so angry to see that beanie every week, it's like, you're the ones that wanted him out of the game. He wouldn't be wearing a beanie if he was still controlling the game, so pick and choose. That was a good one. On a more serious note, what I'm thankful for is our listeners.
That's too easy.
But for real, what I want to say is just, I really enjoy the little community that has popped up around us and that we are a part of on our website, through Twitter or whatever. And I'm just thinking that just because, recently we've spent a little time in other communities, selflessly promoting our work. And it just, look, all communities are different and they become their own little thing. And I'm not going to sit here and say, that one sucks. Although some of them toads suck, by the way. They're just different. And I like that we have a place where people are polite. I don't know if that's a complete right word, but we are able to engage with Survivor. We're clearly passionate about it. We're talking about it on the internet, but we realize that it's a show. It's fun, and you should be able to converse with it, show your passion, but in a fun way. And, understand that we're more often than not looking for jokes. Because there seems to be some people who comment, and I would say they probably aren't indicative of the entire community, but people driven to comment. They're just humorless. And that isn't our audience, and I'm thankful for that. And I'm thankful that there's a tone that everybody sticks to, but people aren't blindly rabbiting back our opinions to us, because that seems to happen. So I encourage everybody to continue to challenge us and to avoid groupthink, because that bothers me more than anything. But keep being cool.
Yeah. The Savage one is actually a good point of where we were definitely not getting our opinions parroted back to us.
Yeah, and that just made us stronger, and we loved it.
Yeah, it was great.
Yeah, I mean, we post something to our community, and you get it. You guys play along. It's fun. You maybe post it somewhere else, and they're like, what? How could blah, blah, blah? And obviously, I'm talking around it, but, I've done 2 posts recently that I was not being serious with, folks. And our audience, the people who are listening to it, get that. It was all in good fun, and our community makes Survivor more fun for me. I think this show, more than any other, is more fun when you can talk about it with people. And then that brings us to the plug section, and another thing we're very thankful for,
which is purplerockpodcast.com, which is our website, and you can go there. We generally, this week probably being the exception, have stuff up every weekday, ranging from posts that will discuss things that happened in the episode that week. We do a live blog, which is generally done by Matt every week. We do, of course, the podcast up there. I do a Survivor blog post. And every once in a while, Mark actually does things for us.
We should get him to do something. That guy's been slacking and doing his real job and such. But obviously, he has stepped in with the live blogs as well. On that site, you can find a link, or you can go directly to purplerockpodcast.com/Amazon if you want to help support us. If you're buying stuff on Amazon, you can go through that, and we get a tiny percentage of your purchase. And that helps pay for the website, that helps pay for the podcast, and again, a big thank you for the people that are doing that. Because we might be at the point where this thing doesn't cost us any money.
Yeah, which is amazing because our downloads keep going up and up to levels that we never thought would ever happen when we started this. And the costs were rising alongside that, so the Amazon thing has been nice. It's at least deferring some costs, which is great.
You can, if you'd like to, be part of that community, obviously visit us there, comment on our posts, or you can converse with us on Twitter. I am at Purple Rock Andy. The show /John is at Purple Rock Pod, and our other contributors are Purple Rock, their names. You can follow us on Tumblr, purplerockpodcast.tumblr.com, or you can send us an email at purplerockpodcast@gmail.com. Managed to stay awake through the whole thing. Way to fight the turkey-induced coma.
Except that it's a day later when we're recording this, so I'm well over that coma.
You don't eat leftovers?
No. Leftovers are for chumps, Andy.
Well, what do we have left over to do for this show?
We have to hit some theme music, I believe.